A grubby stitch-up. That, in essence, was the opposition's take on the UK government's deal to secure the DUP's support for Theresa May's minority administration. In return for their backing, the Democratic Unionists won an extra £1 billion for health, education and infrastructure in Northern Ireland. But there won't be any more money for Scotland or other parts of the UK. The First Minister of Wales, Carwyn Jones, was angry.
This is the most outrageous bung I've seen in nearly 20 years of politics. I don't begrudge the funding for Northern Ireland, but what this means is that austerity will end in Northern Ireland and carry on in England, Wales and Scotland. That just can't be right. This has nothing to do with creating a stable government for the UK. This is about trying to save Theresa May's neck.
But the First Secretary of State, Damien Green, defended the deal and the decision to sidestep the Barnett formula, insisting there's plenty of precedent for such funding commitments.
This is block grant. This is not part of the usual formula. But we do spend extra money in other parts of the country, whether England, Wales or Scotland. And indeed, we've said, on top of that, we said in the Conservative Election Manifesto that we would have a UK prosperity fund so that when, after Brexit, we will have funds to replace those European funds that supported particularly disadvantaged parts of the country.
Well, the Labour MSP for Glasgow, James Kelly's with us in the studio now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you support the Scottish Government's call for more money for Scotland on the back of this deal?
Well, it's absolutely clear that this deal has been put together to save Theresa May's premiership after a disastrous general election campaign, and her popularity has been plummeting. She's got the DUP into Downing Street and she's put together a slush fund to save her political career. It's an absolutely disgraceful set of circumstances.
But it's what happens when we have minority government, isn't it? Deals are done. Well, that's what happened in 2010. That's what would have happened in 2015 or 2017 if Labour had been in the position of a minority government.
This is a cash for votes scandal. £1 billion been piled into this deal, £100 million for every DUP MP. And what it means is that while the rest of the UK suffers cuts in austerity, this deal's put together simply to save the career of a failing Tory Prime Minister.
So do you support the Scottish Government's position, which is that on the back of this deal, Scotland should get more money?
What the Tory government should do, they should immediately review the terms of this deal and ensure that there's fairness across the United Kingdom.
Well, why can't you just say that you support what the Scottish Government's saying? I
accept there should be fairness across the United Kingdom and there should be a fair deal for Scotland on the same terms that extra money has been pushed into Northern Ireland.
But you can't bring yourself to back what the SNP's saying.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with the SNP on this. I think it's absolutely right that Scotland gets a fair deal and that the appropriate Barnett consequentials are implemented here, and the Tory government have got to review that immediately.
But isn't the reality that actually the reason that there aren't Barnett consequentials is because this is direct money to Northern Ireland? The Barnett formula invariably is about an increase in funding in prosperous areas of England and sometimes Wales too, which then has a knock-on effect to other parts of the UK. That's not what this is.
No, nobody should be under any misunderstanding. This is simply a fiddle to save the career of Theresa May.
So how much? Well, you've made that point before. How much extra money should Scotland get then?
Well, if you take for example the extra money going into health and education, there's £350 million going into Northern Ireland. So the appropriate consequentials on that part of the deal alone and on the other areas should be put into Scotland. Scotland shouldn't be suffering cuts as a result of this deal, and that's a consequence of this.
But the Barnett formula, I go back to my point, the Barnett formula is not about extra spending in Northern Ireland, it's about extra spending in England, and there isn't to be extra spending in England.
No, but quite clearly what's happened here is that, as David Mundell put it, the Barnett deal has been subverted here. The rules have been bent in order to save the Tory government's position.
So should Labour try and oppose this extra money for Northern Ireland then at Westminster?
What Labour will be doing is speaking out loudly and clearly for a fair deal for Scotland. The Tory government must review the terms of the deal immediately and ensure fairness across the United Kingdom.
So if it comes to it, if there isn't to be this fairness across the United Kingdom, should Labour try and stop this deal?
Labour will oppose any deal which is going to deliver cuts and austerity across the United Kingdom. We will be loud and clear on that. We want fairness.
So you'd oppose this money going to Northern Ireland because the rest of the country isn't getting money?
We'll be speaking out loudly for a deal, an equitable deal across all the countries of the United Kingdom. Fairness has got to be at the heart of that, rather than a simple pockle to save the career of a Tory Prime Minister.
James Kelly, Labour MSP, thank you very much for coming in this morning.
So just days before the UK Parliament is due to vote on the Queen's speech, the deal to keep Theresa May in power is finally in place. Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionists will back the Conservatives on key legislation ensuring the government's survival. Standing on the steps of Downing Street, the DUP leader Arlene Foster detailed the quid pro quo.
There will be no change to the pensions triple lock and the universal nature of the winter fuel payment across the United Kingdom. Following our discussions, the Conservative Party has recognised the case for higher funding in Northern Ireland. We welcome this financial support of £1 billion in the next 2 years, as well as providing new flexibilities on almost £500 million previously committed to Northern Ireland.
Well, that promise of extra cash could have brought a bonus for Scotland. Indeed, at the weekend, the Scottish Secretary, David Mundell, indicated he'd refuse to support any funding package that attempted to subvert the Barnett rules.
I'll be making absolutely clear that whatever deal is agreed or support mechanism, any funds go through the appropriate and well-established procedures, and if Barnett consequentials are due to Scotland, then they are paid to Scotland.
Under the terms of the formula, Scotland would have been in line for a figure in the region of £3 billion. But the UK government has confirmed there'll be no extra cash for any of the devolved nations as a result of the deal with the DUP. We asked to speak to the Secretary of State, David Mundell, or the Scottish Tory leader, Ruth Davidson. We were told neither was available. Let's speak to Ross Thomson, Conservative MP for Aberdeen South, who joins us from Westminster now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is austerity over?
Well, what we've got in place here is a deal which ensures that we have a stable government which will take forward a programme which enables us to leave the European Union and deliver the best possible deal, not just for the wider UK, but obviously Scotland as well, its communities and its businesses and its industries.
So you've bought the votes of the DUP?
Absolutely not. I mean,
well, if this is a deal about stable government, that is in essence what you've done.
Funding beyond Barnett, which is what we've seen in this deal, is something which is commonplace across the UK. Scotland itself has benefited from funding beyond Barnett. You can't say that Scotland has been bought off. It's part of being part of the United Kingdom, which we voted to stay part of in 2014.
But the problem is
resources can be pooled and shared, and that's what we've seen.
You stood on a manifesto just a couple of months ago where you told us that you had to restrict winter fuel payments to some elderly people, that the triple lock on pension payments had to be loosened because the government didn't have any money. Now you've found £1 billion to buy the votes of the DUP.
I welcome the fact that actually the triple lock is going to be kept. I welcome the fact that, just as Ruth Davidson had said during the campaign, that we would do something different in Scotland round about winter fuel allowance.
But you couldn't afford it 2 months ago, and now suddenly, when Theresa May's coat's on a sugary peg, the money's there.
Look, we are now seeing these changes, which I think are very welcome. It's actually something which Ruth Davidson herself had called for, and I'm pleased that actually these things have been reviewed. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
David Mundell said he would not support funding which deliberately sought to subvert the Barnett rules. He's capitulated, hasn't he?
Not at all. I mean, David Mundell was very clear, even in your clip, that if there was to be Barnett consequentials for Scotland, they should come to Scotland. But we're not seeing spending in English services rise, which would result in a consequential. This is additional spend beyond Barnett, just as Scotland has seen, with about £700 million being invested in city deals in Aberdeen and in Glasgow and in Inverness. And then let's also bear in mind that now all Scottish cities are on the route.
Well, we'll come back to the city deals in a second,
deal, which is even additional spend.
Mr Mundell said in the newspapers over the weekend that he would block any backdoor funding for Northern Ireland if it meant the other devolved nations missing out. That's the circumstance we find ourselves in. So will you be supporting Mr Mundell in blocking this?
No, I don't agree with the premise that this is the situation we find ourselves in. There's nothing backdoor about this. This is all incredibly open, transparent and upfront. And this is about additional spend beyond Barnett.
But it means the other devolved nations are missing out. That's the criteria under which Mr Mundell said he would block it.
No, you're looking at... I don't look at things through a nationalist perspective of pitting one part of the UK against the other. I don't see the SNP, when we were getting additional funding in Scotland through city deals, also saying that that same spending should be happening in Northern Ireland and Wales. This is part of the benefit of being part of a united kingdom where you can pool and share resources. And I welcome the fact that actually there will be this additional spend in Northern Ireland, which actually helps it to secure its executive as these negotiations go forward, because this is not money for the DUP, this is money for all communities in Northern Ireland.
And those city deals that you mention are not really comparable, are they? Because they had matched funding from the Scottish Government and sometimes from local authorities. Sometimes, in fact, the money from the Scottish Government was higher than was being invested by Westminster. So are you telling us that we matched funding from the Northern Ireland Executive for this £1 billion?
UK city deals are just exactly that, UK city deals. They would never have come around if it weren't for UK government and being part of a united kingdom.
But they're not the same. You're not comparing like with yesterday's deal, are you?
This is additional funding beyond Barnett that we have benefited from, just as the V&A in Dundee has benefited from with about £5 million. My own city, Aberdeen, is getting £1.5 million for the art gallery in the budget that was announced by the Chancellor. So additional spend beyond Barnett is something which is not uncommon and something that Scotland has benefited from and only benefits from as a member of the United Kingdom, something that the SNP want to rip us out from, leaving us with a £15 billion black hole in our public finances.
Is there any prospect of you and your 12 colleagues who've been sent to Westminster from Scotland opposing this deal or fighting for more money for Scotland on the back of it?
Scottish Conservative MPs will always fight for Scotland's corner and will do so from the heart of government, not grievance politics from the back benches or the sidelines as we've had.
But with respect, you've just told us you're going to ignore any extra money that might come Scotland's way as a result of this deal.
Not at all. For example, even just in my first week in this place, I actually was able to, at reception, grab the arm of the Chancellor of the Exchequer and was able to talk to him about the decommissioning tax relief that we need in the North Sea, something which he was very supportive of, was keen to talk to me.
You didn't think of mentioning Barnett consequentials in the wake of a DUP deal too?
Do you know how much decommissioning tax relief would help support businesses in Aberdeen if we can get these small operators in to take over these larger assets? That is a huge boost to the North Sea, and that is something which Conservative MPs, Scottish Conservative MPs, can do from within the heart of government. The SNP can't do that, and that's why we will continue to use our influence within the wider party to achieve real, tangible benefits for Scotland over the long term and the next 5 years.
But as regards using your influence, can we just be clear, you will not be in any way pressuring Theresa May to give more money to Scotland on the back of this DUP deal?
Look, we will always be fighting for Scotland's corner. We will be using our influence at every budget opportunity. Just you wait and see it. Every opportunity, we will be fighting Scotland's corner to get the best possible deal for Scotland, which will always be part of the United Kingdom, because this actually reminds us of the benefits of being part of the United Kingdom, that you can pool and share resources, something that Scotland has benefited from in relation to city deals and more, and will continue to do so, something that will be totally jeopardised if the SNP get their way.
Ross Thomson, Conservative MP for Aberdeen South, thank you for your time this morning.
So it's been described by the UK government's political opponents as a grubby and shameless deal designed purely to keep the Prime Minister in power. The DUP is signed on the dotted line to give the Tories their support. In return, Northern Ireland will get an extra £1 billion.
But as we've been hearing, there's anger that the Barnett formula isn't being invoked and the other devolved nations will get nothing from the deal. Speaking earlier on the programme, the Conservative MP for Aberdeen South, Ross Thomson, defended the government's decision.
This is additional funding beyond Barnett that we have benefited from, just as the V&A in Dundee has benefited from with about £5 million. My own city, Aberdeen, is getting £1.5 million for the art gallery in the budget that was announced by the Chancellor. So additional spend beyond Barnett is something which is not uncommon and something that Scotland has benefited from and only benefits from as a member of the United Kingdom, something that the SNP want to rip us out from, leaving us with a £15 billion black hole in our public finances.
Well, the SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
What's the difference between a grubby deal propping up a minority government and a progressive alliance?
Well, what you've got here, quite simply, is pork barrel politics of the worst kind. It's the Conservatives having to do a deal with the DUP to keep themselves in power. And I think we have to remember that this is a consequence of Theresa May's arrogance in going to the electorate on the anticipation that she was going to get a landslide. It didn't happen. She got a bloody nose. And now she's effectively paying off DUP MPs in order to stay into power.
But just to be clear, this is what you were going to do had the Labour Party been in a position with no majority at this past election and at 2015. You would have propped them up, and I presume you would have extracted some kind of financial benefit from it.
One of the things that we argued for in the election campaign is that we wanted to see an end to austerity. We wanted to see investment in infrastructure and public services right throughout the United Kingdom. We called for £118 billion to be invested over the lifetime of this Parliament, a part of a progressive alliance, but recognising our responsibilities in Scotland and beyond.
So you would have been looking for economic or budget benefit for Scotland?
Well, we would have been looking for benefit for Scotland, but in the context of investment elsewhere. There has to be fairness, and there has to be respect for all parts of the United Kingdom. This does not help the Union, because what you've got is a situation that there's £1 billion going into Northern Ireland. Now, I welcome that investment in Northern Ireland. I've got no issue with that. But this has to be done under Barnett. Let's not forget that as recently as this weekend, David Mundell was making that case. I really want to say to David...
Well, he said if the funding falls within Barnett consequentials, it should come to Scotland. The argument is it doesn't fall within those consequentials.
Of course it should, because we're talking about investment in public services, we're talking about infrastructure investment. That should be done under the auspices of Barnett, and if I may say so, if it was done on that basis, then we'd be talking about additional investment in Scotland of up to £2.9 billion. This is significant, and frankly I think the Tories that have come down to Westminster from Scotland should be hanging their head in shame, and I'll actually be asking them to do what we in the SNP are doing, which is standing up for Scotland. And there's a real question for the Secretary of State: is he the Cabinet's man in Scotland, or is he going to stand up with us and make sure that Scotland gets what it deserves, which is equivalence of funding that is going to Northern Ireland?
But the Barnett consequentials ultimately are about equivalence of funding when money is spent in England.
But you've got a particular deal which has been done for Northern Ireland, and it's not right that what the government in London is doing...
That shouldn't normally be covered by Barnett consequential, should it?
But the point is, this is a specific deal which has been done for Northern Ireland. It's pork barrel politics, as I said at the beginning.
But that's not my question. My question is about Barnett. You keep talking about Barnett consequentials. Barnett consequentials, quite specifically, are about money that is spent in England.
David Mundell was making the point at the weekend that this should be covered under Barnett consequentials. I want to hold him to that, because it's absolutely outrageous that this magic money tree that the Tories keep saying doesn't exist has just been shaken and £1 billion has fallen out. If it's good enough for Northern Ireland, then we need to see that investment in Scotland as well. And let's not forget that we've had a cut to our budget over a 10-year period under the Conservatives of £2.9 billion. If we had the equivalence of this deal, that would cover that black hole that was suffered for, easing the pain and the pressure that we're seeing in our public services. It simply isn't good enough for the government in London to buy votes the way that they are doing, because that's what's happening, and refusing to accept the responsibilities to make sure that we get the equivalence of funding in Scotland.
And what is the difference between what we saw yesterday and the budget deal between the SNP and the Greens at Holyrood, where Derek Mackay was able to magic up an extra £220 million of extra spending to get the Greens on board for his budget?
Well, that's entirely different, because you're actually talking about deals which are done in a Parliament over a fixed budget. This is actually about something entirely different, because it's new funding which is going to Northern Ireland, and it's about fairness and respect to all parts of the United Kingdom. That's the bit that's missing from this deal.
It's about finding extra money, though, that we were told wasn't there previously, and that's what happened with the budget in Scotland.
Well, we've always argued that one of the things the UK government could do is make that investment that we talked about and still balance the budget over the lifetime of this Parliament. We know the pressure that our public services are under, and look, let's be honest here, what's going to happen in Northern Ireland as a consequence of this? There's a 20% increase in funding for infrastructure. That's very, very substantial. I want to make sure that we can see the same benefits of that, and by the way, that would lead to an increase in productivity, allow us to strengthen our economic growth in Scotland. That's why it's so important that we get our fair share.
Might it bring the Northern Ireland peace process back on track?
Well, I hope and pray that the Northern Ireland peace process is back on track this week. All of us want to see stability in government in the north of Ireland.
So would you go out of your way to try and stop this investment in Northern Ireland?
No, because I welcome the fact that there is that investment in Northern Ireland. What we are arguing is that all parts of the United Kingdom should be treated fairly, and we need to see that additional investment in Scotland, and I'm asking the Conservatives north of the border to come together with us to press the government to make sure that that happens.
Well, they argue that there have been precedents in the past. They point to the city deals, they point to the money that's been given to the V&A in Dundee. Well, you weren't arguing at that point for more money for other parts of the UK when Scotland was benefiting, were you? Did I miss you arguing for more money for the rest of the UK at that point?
If you take the city deals, the government hasn't delivered what it said it would do. There's a substantial shortfall in the funding that should be coming to Aberdeen and Inverness. And if I may say so, I think the government in London has form on this. One of the areas that we have been pressing them on is the convergence uplift payments that should be going to crofters and farmers that the EU gave to the UK, and the clear understanding that that would come to Scotland, and they haven't delivered.
But just to be clear, when money has come to Scotland, you haven't argued for the rest of the UK to benefit benefit, have you?
I want to see investment in all parts of the United Kingdom. That's something that we in the SNP have been doing. It was a very clear statement that we had in the manifesto of wanting to see an end to austerity. So yes, indeed, we have been calling for investment right throughout the United Kingdom.
When there were city deals, when the V&A was getting extra money, you were saying that actually there should be consequentials for the rest of the UK?
We have always argued that Scotland should not be a special case, that there should be investment right across the United Kingdom. There are city deals that are happening in other places as well. This is not specific to Scotland.
Ian Blackford, the SNP's Westminster leader. Thank you for your time this morning.